Welcome back, everybody, to Fraternal Conversations and Consolation with me, your host, whatever I am. Today, I got Brother Worst with me, who is the guardian, the visitor, the pastor of Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Tucson, Arizona, which is awesome. Brother, thanks for being here with me today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. This is great. I first ran into Pastor Hull at Higher Things, and we had a couple of great conversations there. We got really down into the weeds about manliness and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think he had a presentation, and then since then I've got projects floating around in my mind. I told you I was going to do I was doing the video series on hypermasculinity and like kind of
right,
reclaiming the biblically masculine things, and
right.
I've stopped on that because I realized this was actually after reading, I think, Pastor Richard's book on Will the Real Church Please Stand Up? I'm like, you know what?
Right.
This could actually make a pretty decent, like, week by week Bible study type book. So
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I stopped the videos. Now I'm looking at it as writing Bible study stuff. But yeah, I
No.
was like, Pastor Hole, the manliness guy. Yeah, let's talk about that. So yeah,
But no, it's true. You know, it was interesting. I was talking with a member one time, and they said, back in the day when I was growing up, we always saw the pastor up here on like this pedestal. He was this guy up here. Now we know nowadays that you're just like us. You're a sinner just like us. I'm like, yeah, but you still have the expectation of me being a holier person. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, if I saw you drunk out in public, you'd be like, oh, people make mistakes. If you saw me drunk out in public, you'd be like, Pastor, how could you? So I said, no, I'm still up here, not because I'm awesome in and of myself, but I'm the man that God has put into the office. The office is there. Therefore, what did Kenneth Corby say? Jesus calls men to be pastors, so you better be one.
yeah. Be a
So,
man. Don't be a boy. Yeah.
yeah, a man lives sacrificially. A boy says, what do I get out of it? And there's a difference. So, but it's a hard thing to do, though.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, there's a couple of verses that are shooting through my mind, like to him who much is given, much will be required. That sort of thing is, or not very
Right.
many people should hold. I forget how the verse goes. Should be teachers. There
Mm-hmm.
there is a degree where you're like, yeah, a pastor is just a dude, just another guy. But on the other hand, there's also Second Timothy, for example, there is like a list of qualifications for to be a pastor.
Right.
To be a man, you just have to be a man. Like there's ways you should
Yeah.
behave, but you cannot be disqualified from being a man. So there's an additional collection of standards, an additional
Yeah.
collection of requirements that pastors have to meet. So yeah, to one degree, like maybe your pastor likes the same football games you do, but to another degree, it's like your pastor has an obligation not just to study, but also to exemplify Christ to a
Right.
greater degree. You can do more things without a clerical collar on than you can with a clerical collar. And if you're driving the pastor mobile around town, maybe you drive a
Yeah.
little bit better, a
Well, no,
little bit less road rage.
it's like it's a when you look at the pastor, he's placed into the office of Christ. Why does he raise his hands like this when he blesses? It's the same as Christ did in John 20. He shows them his hands to say, "This is who it's me." When the pastor raises his hands, he's the man of Christ. He's Christ's ambassador. He is the one who stands in Christ's stead. So there is a heavier weight on him. There's more expected. He's the dude that shows up in the weight room that can lift it. So there's a higher expectation for him. It's like I was watching. I always watch World Strongman competition, like past ones and
Oh yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Some of my favorites are from the '80s with like Jan Paul Sigmason and Jeff Capes and all these guys. And we were watching one, and it was one that Sigmason won, and the boys like, "Who's that dude? This Viking guy?" And they're like, "Why is everyone so hard on him?" I'm like, well, because he has the expectation. Everyone expects him to win. So that's why they're critical of him if he
Yep.
doesn't. And with the pastor, there's the expectation set by God. And now, because we've read the word, we know what these expectations are. It's a heavy office. It's a heavy cross to bear. Um, Yet we labor in it joyfully, but it's still heavy.
Yeah, there's so before we got recorded, we were talking about like weightlifting and stuff like that, and it's interesting how much crossover there is between that. On one hand, so I was talking to somebody, I was trying to convince them like, come on, you got to go to the gym with me because I don't. There's no, nobody goes to the gym with me because whatever.
Yep.
But that's how I started. Is somebody else had to drag me with them, and then eventually I got hooked on it. And they said I don't enjoy working out, and I was thinking, I was like, look, when I work out, sometimes it's painful. I mean, pushing
Yeah.
weights, you're tearing muscles, you're doing all these things, you're intentionally harming your body for the sake of growth. So there is
Right.
pain involved. It is a heavy, not necessarily a heavy cross to bear, but maybe a heavy bar to bear. But there's some degree in which you're like, okay, I bear it joyfully. There is joy in even the suffering, and I think that
Yeah.
that's kind of a uniquely Christian aspect, and particularly for pastors. Like as a
Yeah.
pastor, you're going to be expected to suffer. As a man, even Ephesians 5, you're going to be expected to suffer and to sacrifice. And it's not that you're supposed to walk into that saying, look, I don't, I mean, yeah, sometimes it's bad, but you do it joyfully. I mean, um, Christ is the excellent example of this, as somebody who suffered joyfully, not because he enjoys the pain, some
Yeah.
masochist, but because he enjoys what is being accomplished by the pain. I think we have to
Right.
reflect that sometimes. Um, I mean, he's the perfect example to follow there.
Well, and that's the thing is what is the fruit of this suffering? When Christ knows that fruit of the suffering, that he goes to make all things new. Your pastor and what it means to suffer. It's not like he hates his job. That's not what we're saying. Like you hate clocking in, clocking out. You hate your boss. It's more you're gonna talk with people that are people that love you and people that hate your guts. But the reality is, both of them, both the people that love you and the people that hate your guts, because you love to to give them what they need in the gospel, they're both going to drain. Even those that love you. You can have someone in the church that they're their number one fan, but they're going through something, or they even want to just talk about something. Everything you do as a pastor is taking a piece out, is draining. It's like that image with Christ when he's walking through the big crowd, and
Yeah.
and the woman touches his garment. What does he say? Who touched me? And the disciples are like, how do you know someone touched you in this crowd? Because it leaves him. And as a pastor, that's what you're doing when you work on a sermon, when you work on a Bible study, when you go do visitation. Because, yeah, I love going and visiting my saints that are homebound. But then on the way out, I'm like, man, I wish I could stay for like 10 hours because you can tell they're just lonely, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and it ends up being a stress to pastors because it's like, what does the devil whisper in your ear? Is you haven't done enough, or you shouldn't have said that, or hey, you had your voters meeting after you did two services on Sunday plus a Bible study, so you're already kind of tired and drained, and then everyone wanted to sit and talk, and maybe you said something you shouldn't have, and that's the reality. There's
Yeah.
the stressor. So how do you? We talked about this a little bit before we start recording. How do you deal with it? What is the best way to deal with the reality of the office you bear and I would say the greater stress than any other vocation that's comes with it.
Yeah, there's two examples that come to mind biblically. I think of when somebody is think of the New Testament. Somebody's worn out from the stress of the ministry. One example is Christ. He kind of goes away from the crowd. I mean, sometimes it
Right.
doesn't work. The crowd follows him anyway. But there are times when he goes away from the crowd. Sometimes he gets into a boat and just goes sailing. Peter is another example. I'm trying to think of after the resurrection. What
Right.
does Peter do of this stress after around the period of the resurrection? He goes fishing. He goes
Yeah.
back to he knows how to do, and it doesn't say Peter goes fishing because he needs money or Peter goes fishing
Right.
because he needs to work or whatever. But I
Yeah.
think that part of it is God has created mankind. Adam in the garden was created to work, so there has to be some sort of thing that you're working on. I don't know. I mean, there can be some sort of passive activity, just rest sometime. I mean, that's what the Sabbath is created for, the seventh
Right.
day. There is a degree where you have to rest, but I think part of resting, particularly for pastors, is you need something else to work on. Are you going fishing? Are you not just watching TV, but like, are you playing sports? Are you taking the dogs on a walk? It has to be
Right.
something habitual. It has to be something maybe that stresses a different area. So we were talking about weightlifting. For me, if I'm struck by melancholy, actually, this is
Yeah.
pretty common, depression and stress. I got to
Yeah.
get to the gym.
Yeah.
I got to put some stress on my body to take off the stress from my mind. I'm not listening to commentaries and sermon
Yep.
prep stuff. I'm listening to obnoxious music and I'm pushing big weights.
Yep.
And that's where my focus is.
Oh
But
yeah, man.
that's what I found helps me.
Yeah. I put on the nickel back and start lifting, you know. Actually, I do it every time. Every time my boy and I do a PR, you see, nickel. Everyone's hating on the Nickelback. Oh, it's just some bros that want to have a good time. That's all Nickelback is. But no, I always put on "It's a Day Was Your Last Day" by Nickelback when we do our PR. You know, like all right,
Nice.
you know. Um, but no, it's like how you look at the reality of what a pastor does. Bev Yankee compared it one time to a music video by Tom Petty. Um, well, the song's "Last Dance with Mary Jane," which is about getting high, but the music video is this Alice in Wonderland thing where Alice at one point is like this cake and everyone's taking pieces of her. It's like that's being the
Mm,
pastor is you have all these pieces being taken all the time. And whether you know it or not, you have them happening. So, but you do it joyfully. It's like, I love doing this. I love being there with people when they have doubts, when they have anxieties, when you have someone that is dealing with their parents being sick, their family being sick, themselves being sick, someone who has cancer, who's just knows that that could be the thing that ends them. So they start facing death on a daily basis in reality, and you come in as the one who, and literally that's what those words mean, the episcope and episcopos, the visitation office, and you visit people by guarding their souls in this reality with Christ. And it drains you, and you could turn to things that aren't good, like I'm going to start overeating all the time, you know, eating things that I probably shouldn't, or watching things. We were talking earlier. Just, I mean, the rise in pornography is there everywhere, but pastors viewing it and using it all the time. And all it is it's a doorway the devil uses. I remember, I think it was David Peterson said in a sermon one time, if given the choice, and these are your only two choices between having a Ouija board in the house or a pornographic magazine, he'd take the Ouija board.
mm.
And his point is how demonic the pornography is. And of course, he's not saying he supports Ouija boards at all, but
Right, right.
how pastors turn to this. Why? I feel powerless in my church, but when I go on and look at these things, I have a sense of control. Um, and we need brother pastors checking in with each other on this. That's the point of the fraternal conversations. Hey, are you lifting a lot lately? I see that you can't walk. You did leg day yesterday. Or you can't reach for the oatmeal. Clearly you did back and buys yesterday. Something like that.
Yeah.
To actually
Yeah,
say,
when was the last time you had time to go to the gym or something like that? I know people can get
right,
so focused on work that, I mean, you were talking about, so I love that. I love that illustration of like a cake and you have constantly have pieces taken out. I heard somebody else kind of give an illustration of like a cup or a chalice. And it's a
yeah,
joy to give, to I mean, communion, especially, obviously, it's a joy to give people
yeah,
what's in the chalice. But when it runs low, it has to be filled up. So it's
right.
wonderful if you're distributing communion, but if you're not filling the chalice, you're not going to be able to keep doing your job.
No,
And you can't fill
no,
the chalice with something. You can't put Sprite in there. You can't put pornography in there. You can't put
no,
just food in the just junk food. It's not going to
no,
be filled with good things for you to give to other people. So
no.
how are you refilling your chalice? And sometimes you don't notice when the tank is low. You're just driving.
Well,
And
yeah,
it takes a brother to say, "Hey, you haven't taken a vacation in 4 years.
yeah,
I know you're going through this. I know it's Lent or it's Advent or whatever.
yeah,
It's what are you doing to take care of yourself?
right.
The other example is the airplane or whatever. You're supposed to put on the mask first before you help someone
Yep,
else. What are you
right,
doing to make yourself a good pastor before you
right.
can serve the other people?
Well, and that comes to one of my biggest critiques, and this is where there may be disagreement. And I
Mhm.
guess I'm overstating it. Before I became a pastor, I went to church every Sunday. I went to Bible study every Sunday. I would find the best, like when I went to college, I found the best pastor that I believed, Ralph Taus in Melrose Park outside Chicago. And he was my father confessor. So not only did I go to church on Sundays, Bible study, I went to chapel 5 times a week at Concordia, and I had a father confessor. I had all this stuff. Then seminary, I got less on Sunday morning because now I'm serving. I'm not fully serving. I still listen to the sermon, and everyone knows. I mean, basically, being a field worker or a vicar is like your kid wearing pull ups. No one expects much from you. As
Yeah,
long if you can make
yeah,
it to the potty and go, everyone claps and rejoices. But if you don't, no one gets mad at you. But still, at seminary, you still have chapel every day. You still have times
mhm.
off from field ed that you can go and worship. But then when I became a pastor, when the hands are placed on me at my ordination, I've made the statement I was ordained to self medicate now. And what
Mm.
I mean by that is I don't get to go to church on Sunday mornings anymore and just be fed. I don't get to, even if I go to a conference and I sit at the pastor's conference, what am I doing when the pastor preaches? Or if I go to my circuit meeting and the
Yeah.
pastor's preaching, it's like, I would have preached it differently. Yeah, but you're not preaching.
Right.
So how do you fill
Yeah,
it? And that's
you're a,
go ahead.
yeah. No, I was gonna say, yeah, you're like a chef tasting somebody else's food. You can't just enjoy it.
Yeah.
How much salt would I have put in there?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is you need someone else that it's you need a Nathan. David needed Nathan. You need that man
Hmm.
that will also minister to you. That'll actually, and not just when you go seek out as your father confessor whenever you're kind of feeling down. Because burnout, you're not actually burned out once you start feeling it. You're burned out before it even happens. Through just the daily
Hmm.
grinding of life, the burnout's there already. You're just kind of getting by and doing it. So, what do we need to fill our chalices, like you mentioned earlier with lifting weights? You need that person to come and grab you and go, hey, come lift with me. Hey, come do this. Let me instruct you. Let me feed you. Let me encourage you. And this is what I would say. Your pastor actually needs church more than you do because he's the one that the devil hates the most in the congregation.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And well, I mean, that's so. In terms of finding things outside of the church, it's probably easier than. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily. Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily easier than finding like another church service to go to. Hypothetically, I think there's another church in the area, another LCMS church, fantastic congregation that I could probably drive an hour to go to and go there on a Wednesday, for example,
Yeah.
if I'm not picking up the kids or doing something else. Um, and if I want to say, okay, I'm going to go see the father confessor, regardless of if I've got something on my mind, I'm going to go see him every Thursday at 10:45 in the morning.
Right.
That's fine. But a lot of times we let a lot of other things slip by. We say, well, I don't have time to rest. I don't have time to work on extracurricular activities. My father, he does guitar, he does musical stuff.
Yeah.
Beyond me, I don't have a musical mind, but
Yeah.
for him, he has to play music. He has to do it. This is how he recharges. He has to ride a
Yeah.
motorcycle. He has to do
Yeah.
these things. And I think, I mean, I figured out weightlifting, and this was back in the Marine Corps. I figured that out. I
Yeah.
don't know. I legitimately don't know if other pastors have figured out if they have something or not. Because I've talked to other
Right.
pastors, and I know one pastor. He goes on vacations with his wife, and it's wonderful. And they decompress for
Yeah.
2 weeks. He turns off his phone.
Yep.
But is this, from your experience, is this something where most pastors have an outlet, or is this something where most pastors need to start looking for one?
I think most of us, I think guys may have a hobby, something they do.
Hmm.
But what we need is, and this is the argument I'm starting to make, we need more than a hobby. What we need is something that makes the ministry not easier, but more bearable. And what I mean by that is this. You ever seen the movie Fight Club?
Hmm.
Fight Club. There's a scene where Edward Norton is sitting there and he says, when you're fighting, everything else just gets quieter. Everything else is easier now because I survived a fight. So what pastors need is actually something that's going to drain them. Meaning, going into that voters meeting now is not that big a deal. Going into that council meeting now is not that big a deal. Doing with these things, I can do this. And I think putting the body through physical things is that majority of pastors, and myself included, for too long a time, we're just out of shape. We're just not physically there. And we have to put
Yeah.
ourselves through that, almost a physical torment, just to be completely exhausted. Because then, now I'm not saying let's start a pastor fight club. That'd be kind of interesting, you know? I mean,
Well,
maybe
I'm
like
not
a
saying don't.
Fort Wayne chapter, St. Louis chapter, maybe a
Yeah.
St. Catherine's chapter can try to join in, but no one really cares about them.
I think my former bishop was like he did MMA or jujitsu or something like that, and
Yeah,
he was a pretty big guy. So I don't know if
yeah.
I, yeah, we did wrestling too. I think,
Oh, did you
but
have Hardy? Is
yeah,
that who you had or no?
yep, yep.
Yeah,
I had
Bishop
Hardy. Yeah,
Barr,
he's like the guy you did. Yeah,
the czar of
yeah.
the Concordia system now. But no, I
But
mean
yeah, he's
things
moved
like
over
that,
to
you
take care of
know.
the yeah.
But to do things like this, I think that's what pastors have to start doing now. Is not necessarily having something that's like, okay, here's my outlet, my way to be calmer. It's more of what's going to actually show me that I can do this, that I can survive this. What
Yeah, if
cross
you
can
can
be
put
like?
yourself through that much stress, that much kind of, you get used to intensity.
Yeah,
So, like, if you're lifting 400 pounds and then you've got a voters meeting and that's a 200-pound lift, you're like, I only have to lift 200 pounds today.
yeah, I
Okay,
can.
easy. Ronnie Coleman, lightweight, baby.
Yeah, lightweight, baby.
Lightweight.
But the thing is, it's not. And that's the thing is, you're not saying these things aren't big, but what you're saying is, okay,
Right, right.
we can do this now. And that's the thing is,
You've
brother
done it.
pastors
Yeah.
bearing it with each other, going, yeah, God may put you through a hard time right now, but that's because he's strengthening you, that you may actually
Mhm.
bear more weight even and it not be as heavy. So that's been my one
Yeah.
critique of, because it's a big thing right now, pastors conferences, people going around, what can we do for pastor burnout? What can we do for pastors going through mental illness and all these things? And it's like, well, one, stop hugging me and stop patting me on my back going there. No. What I need is I need to toughen up. And how that happens is not saying there's not something that's hard, but how do I kind of wrestle with myself or wrestle with my brother pastors theologically, mentally, physically, and literally sharpen one another so that now we are equipped, that the devil is nervous when he gets out of bed in the morning because he's facing these men who have such authority from Christ. And we're not scared of that devil, you know?
Yeah. There's, I
So
mean, and we have to look, I think, holistically at it, to use a fancy word. Um,
yeah,
we can't just say, well, my pastor's praying and reading the Bible. That's fantastic. I mean, that's, you're getting,
yeah,
your macros. You need that,
yeah,
but you need more as well. You can't say, well, I'm going to neglect my body. I'm going to neglect. So spiritually, for example, it's fantastic to read the Bible. But if you're not engaging with people about the Bible, if you're not arguing in Bible study or finding a
yeah,
pastor and picking a fight about Semper Virgo or something, if you're not putting using it functionally,
yeah,
using the Bible, you're just kind of memorizing verses. It's not gonna hold as well. You're not gonna be as spiritually chiseled. You're not
yeah,
gonna have that functional fitness
right.
for spirituality. You should find a way, and I found it through the internet. I thought it was a waste of time when I was spending during seminary. I was arguing with Roman Catholics online. Like I barely
Yeah,
knew Lutheranism. I was
yeah.
like I know Christianity. I was going to seminary. I'm like, I know who Luther, Paul, and Jesus are, but I don't know who like Bugenhagen and like all the other buildings, whatever,
Yep.
Winnikin. But arguing with Roman Catholics, I thought it was a waste of time until a couple of years later when somebody was asking me. I'm like, yeah, no, obviously the Roman Catholics do this and this, and then they say this verse means this, and of course we Lutherans say this, and I was going
Yeah.
through like Matthew 16 and stuff like that, and I've got this whole argument. I've got both sides of the argument. And somebody says, how do you know this stuff? And I had to stop for a second. I'm like, because I did what I thought was wasting time and arguing with somebody
Yeah.
about the Bible, and it's not a waste of time. It's
No.
a practical exercise,
Yeah.
and sometimes you could do this at Winkles and stuff like that. Pastors will come and they'll bring their own study, and they'll say, well, let's talk about such and such topic or whatever. Let's talk
Yeah.
about female ordination. Let's talk about should women be voting in the voters assembly? What Bible verses are there to consider?
Yeah.
Let's talk about whatever issues are going on for the day.
Yeah.
But I think that you need to challenge, not just like engage in activity, but you need to engage in activity that challenges you, pushes you,
Yeah.
exhausts you physically, spiritually,
Well, yeah.
mentally.
Well, it's like I asked pastors, are you reading when I was in college, when I was in high school, seminary, I read theology as a hobby. I loved reading theology. I'd find new
Oh
theological
yeah.
books and I digest. And now, as a pastor, is that the same? Am I still reading that amount of theology on a daily basis? Is it like, if you have an option, hey, you got an hour and a half of free time today to read, what are you picking up? Well, I'm picking up this work from
Mhm.
Luther, or I just got this thing from John Kleinig, or I'm reading something that doesn't go hand in hand with what I'm doing. Um, actually equipping yourself, growing in the knowledge of the truth. And I like how you mentioned like going to that church once a week. I've made the thing of, I wish it was accessible that every circuit had a service every Friday night that every pastor could go to and rotate. You go to church every week and you actually receive the gifts. Um,
Hmm.
but then mentally, because mentally I think is where it gets us a lot nowadays too, is you have the anxiety, you have the despair, you have the depression, you have the bad days, and realize you're going to have them. You're going to have days where you feel inadequate as a pastor. Good. If you ever felt adequate as a pastor, that's a problem. um, you should feel, why would God put me here in this position? And you're going to feel low, but it kind of talks about that. He who humbles himself will be exalted. So rejoice that you feel low. But the main one I think that we've touched on here today, and I've talked to other brother pastors, is the physical aspect of it. I made a joke at seminary. There's two sizes of pastor. Either their size 72-inch waist or 27-inch waist. They're either huge fat dudes or skinny little twigs, and there's no real in
Roomy
between.
Toomies or yeah.
Yeah, it was like this
Yeah.
is what it was, and I've made the point. It's like, no, it's he's the one. Who were the men I emulated in the scriptures growing up? I wanted to be Samson. I wanted to be,
Mhm.
these men. And
David and his 10,000 killing.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's reality. David picking up Goliath's sword and stuff. But I
Yeah.
mean, the reality of it is your pastor is a man that, yeah, he has demons. He has more demons than you do. He has more
Mm.
on him than you do. But he's that brick that's been closest to the fire. He may be ugly, but he's strong. And that's the thing, is that's what we have to do for one another as pastors. Don't expect it from your lay people. Don't expect it from your spouse. Don't expect it from anybody else. Not that these people are bad people. They could be great people, but it's not their job. You have brother pastors that are in the same position you are to bear that cross with you and give you the reality check you need when you need it. So
Yep.
yeah. It's fun times, man. It's fun times. Well, I'm glad we met this past summer.
Yeah.
It was good when we met there at Higher Things in Arkansas. And I did my little lecture on being a man, and I'm actually doing a debate or a community conversation on abortion this Sunday here in Macomb.
Oh,
So
fun.
that's going to be fun. I'm the
That
token conservative voice, so that'll be a fun time. But
Well, at least they
but
actually found
it's
a conservative to do it.
and they found
Too
me.
often
That's
the
the funny
token
part.
conservative voice is just some, yeah, whoever.
And then they
Yeah.
found me, and they're like, "Oh God, is there someone else? This guy just showed up in a
Are you
lavender
wearing
coat.
the
What are we doing?"
lavender? Yeah,
Yeah.
you gotta bring the lavender.
Oh yeah, man. I'm gonna have
Yeah,
lavender everywhere. They're like, what's going on?
my youth are so we were gonna go to youth gathering this year. We went to Higher Things for the first time this past year. We're gonna go to youth gatherings the coming year, and I actually have some youth now who are saying, "Well, I don't want to go to youth gathering. I want to go back to Higher Things now." So we've got to figure out like, can we move the funds around? Do we have funds? That sort of stuff. And I
Yeah.
think we've got some youth who are just going to go to Higher Things even if they have to pay out of pocket every
Yeah,
year.
man.
So
Yep.
I don't know. I might. Well, you said you're going to be at the Michigan one
Michigan
or
one.
Washington or something.
I'm gonna be in
Yeah.
Michigan because my district convention is the week before the one in Nebraska, and my sons, they go to something called Christ Academy at the Sim in Fort
Yeah.
Wayne, which is the last 2 weeks of June. So I'm like, I'd be like gone or doing something for 5 6 weeks in a row. So we're gonna do Michigan instead. Plus, it's the chapel there's really nice at a Calvin college there. I mean, you're predestined once you walk in to either be blessed or condemned. So it's fun times. So,
That's how it
but
works.
no,
Yeah.
we're gonna go to that one, I
Yeah.
think. So it'll be fun. But they have a good group of speakers for next year. It's just a joy. Higher Things is a fun time. So it's good stuff.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Well, brother, thanks for being on with me today, man. It was a good time, and hopefully some brothers can hear it and grow from it and be strengthened
Yeah,
by it, which is
absolutely.
always good. All
Yeah,
right.
my pleasure.
Well,
Thank you.
everyone, God bless. See you next time. Bye bye.